Hi everybody, this is Laurie Sand and this is a tutorial of my Tunisian asymmetrical leaf stitch pattern. This was featured in my leaf crest wrap pattern, which you can find on the Interweave Crochet website. This is a little bit different, and you're going to see that I'm going to be using my original stitch chart rather than the one that appears in Interweave, which I think is a little bit clearer and a little, at least easier for me to understand, because you can clearly see like the lines of ribbing that are going to be between each row of leaf. I'm going to be using Plymouth Moonshadow, which is a DK weight baby alpaca and cotton blend, which is kind of nice. And I am using a 7mm hook. So this stitch pattern is pretty versatile. It's got really great drape, and it's got a pretty fun organic feel to it, and kind of lacy. That can be used for a lot of different things, including a wrap. You'll also notice that it has pretty significant scallops on the vertical sides and also on the ends. So just bear that in mind when you're deciding what you're going to use this for. And then in terms of making what size you're going to be making, one horizontal stitch repeat, that's this way, back and forth, is going to be 14 stitches, and then one vertical repeat is 20 rows. So just be bearing that in mind. You're going to learn a particular stitch pattern and then you can repeat it to make whatever size you want. I chained 18, so you're going to want to chain a multiple of 14 plus 4. I just went with one repeat just for this demonstration. And so I chained, and then I did the setup row, which is just like usual. You insert your hook into the second chain from your hook and yarn over and pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull up a loop in each chain across, and then when you get to the end you're going to chain one and then you're going to work your return like usual. And now we're going to start working from the chart. So if you look at row 1 of the chart, it starts with a Tunisian simple stitch. That's what the chart starts with. But you're going to actually start with 2 purl stitches just at the beginning of the row. You're not going to add that in any other place. That's just to even out the design. 2 purl stitches, then 1 Tunisian simple stitch, then 2 purls, and then you're going to knit, no, simple stitch, excuse me, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 9 Tunisian simple stitch. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And then you're going to end with another 2 purls. And then you're just going to work the last stitch like usual, however you normally work it. Pull up this last loop and then chain 1. And then work the return. So you'll notice that the first and last stitches, namely this thing we just worked, and then the loop that's going to remain on your hook at the end, I do not include those in the chart, and they're also not really mentioned in the directions either. Like, that's just part of doing Tunisian crochet. That's just going to be in there. Just be sure to work that last stitch as usual every time, and you shouldn't have to worry. Alright, so in this next row we're going to do our first decrease, which is exciting. It's just a regular old decrease. No need to panic just yet. So again, I'm going to start with these 2 purl stitches. And then 1 simple stitch. 2 purls. And now it's time for our first decrease. So you can kind of recognize, I'm not sure how visible it is in the video, but as you're working your piece, you're going to come to like recognize what the shape of the work is. So like, again, there's two columns of leaves that are separated by these pearls, and you're always going to be working your decreases along the edges of the leaves. For the left hand leaf, you're going to work it on the right side, and for the right hand leaf, you're going to work it on the left side. So we're here at the right hand side of the left leaf, and I'm just going to work a regular old Tunisian decrease. I insert my hook under two vertical bars, yarn over and pull up one loop. So you can see how one has been decreased. You can also see that this one tends to lean a little bit to the left, which I'm kind of using to enhance the shape of the leaf. And then you just do Tunisian simple stitches across. And these two pearls, I want to show exactly where I'm going into these pearls. I'm not sure I made that clear earlier. I'm going into the vertical bar above the bump that was from the previous row. And I've made a new bump for this row. There's two of them. And then just the last stitches as usual. And the return as usual. Now, if you've read the directions for the stitch pattern, you know that there are decreases that are worked in the return of the row in this pattern. But you only have to worry about it half the time. You're only working those decreases when you're decreasing on the right hand leaf. So for the first half of the stitch repeat, you're not stressing about that. You're doing just a regular old decrease in the forward pass, and you can see where your decrease was, and you can see that it's next to a set of pearls. Just going back and reviewing how your work looks is going to help you a lot. All right, next row there is no decrease. There's no harassing with that. We're just going to work across. The term in knitting is knit or purl as the stitches present. I don't know if you're not familiar with that, it essentially means that as you're working across, you can kind of just look and see, okay, this was a simple stitch before, I can work it as a simple stitch now for this particular row. I'm not changing anything, I'm just working the stitches as they present. And that makes it a lot less stressful to work. As you start getting more familiar with Tunisian crochet and start to be able to recognize the stitches a little bit more easily, you'll find yourself relying on the chart less and less. All right, now final stitch, chain one, and return pass like usual. I'm going to show one more row with just the regular decrease, and then I'm probably going to turn off the video and work ahead a little bit and show you how to decrease with the right leaning decrease, the one that we work that leans to the right. So yeah, so just one more row with a decrease that leans left, I think, and then we'll skip ahead a little bit. So again, you're always starting out with these pearls, which you can kind of see there, sitting nicely. And oh yeah, the other thing I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. Yarn overs. This is the row where we introduce the increases that are going to make the right hand leaf exist. It's not a leaf right now, it's just a line. It's the stem. So to work a Tunisian yarn over, it's pretty standard. You just loop it over the hook from back to front. And then I'm gonna work a Tunisian simple stitch, yarn over, and then go ahead and work my two pearls. Now you'll notice when I yarn over right before a pearl, it's gonna look a little bit different. So I yarn over, and then I'm preparing for my pearl, and I want to be really sure to hold this loop so this yarn over doesn't get too small. Because by bringing the yarn to the front, I'm kind of unwinding my yarn over a little bit, so I just try to prevent that from happening with my finger. And then I work my two pearl stitches. And then another decrease under two loops. Pull up a loop. You can see the decrease pretty clearly there. And continue working across. And then a couple of pearls here at the end. And the final stitch of the row. And a normal return pass. Once you've done your return pass, you can see very clearly where those yarn overs are. There's a little eyelet that you've created. Now in the next row, we need to work into those eyelets. In the chart, I haven't really distinguished between Tunisian simple stitches and stitches worked into the eyelet. I do specifically call it out in the directions just because I think it's just so much harder to envision what's going on, and it's much easier to get out your stitch count off when you're working from written directions as opposed to the chart. From the chart you can clearly see that a stitch is being worked into a yarn over. So in the written directions I call this I don't know what I called it, Tunisian yarn over stitch or something, TYS I think is the abbreviation that I used. So I'm working a pearl here and a pearl here. So when you see TOIS, like don't panic, and it's really just saying make sure you're working into this yarn over. And that also serves to kind of open up the eyelet a little bit too. And again, pearl. And then again, we're working just a regular old decrease. So you can see that as the left hand leaf is shrinking, the right hand leaf is growing. So that keeps the stitch count somewhat consistent, but there is a changing stitch count throughout. And you'll notice on the chart I have some squares are just grayed out and marked no stitch. And that's again a very common convention in knitting charts, and I just think it really helps clarify what the shape is that you're creating with your crocheting or knitting if you're knitting. This is a pretty classic knitting pattern. The asymmetrical leaf is kind of a beloved knitted lace pattern. I think it's really fun working it like this because, of course, the right side is always facing. You only have to use 2 different kinds of decreases, whereas in the knitting pattern there are actually 4 different kinds of decreases that you have to use. Yeah, so I think that's enough to go over for the decreasing of the left-hand leaf. I'm going to turn off the video and I'll come back when we're ready to start decreasing for the right-hand leaf. And we're back. We are ready to start working row 12 of the chart, you can see we have finished all of these increases for this leaf, and we have finished the decreases for this leaf, and it's kind of come to a point, and we're ready to start decreasing over here. So in the forward pass of a row that has a right-leaning decrease in it, you're actually going to kind of just ignore the fact that there's a decrease, essentially. You're going to kind of work it as you normally would if there was no decrease. And by that I mean that you are going to pull up a loop in each stitch that's involved in the decrease, which in this case is these two stitches, the ones on the left-hand side of this leaf. You may want to consider marking these stitches. I personally don't find it necessary, but you might find it easier to just keep track. Just slip a stitch marker here around these two stitches if you feel like that's going to help you keep track. I personally find I can keep track of it just because of where the purls are placed, and I will show you that when we actually get to the return pass. And we don't have any increases in this row, so we're just doing this one simple stitch here. I also want to point out I have kind of a idiosyncratic way of working purl stitches. I turn my hook towards the back of the work, and I wrap my yarn from front to back. Some say that you should really wrap from back to front like that. I just don't get as good of results that way. I don't find it as natural. But just be aware of that is an idiosyncratic way of working that stitch. So don't feel bad if you're doing it differently. All right, so I've started working my return now. And while I do it, I am keeping track of where I'm at. So I'm working some purls here. So I'm going to step back and evaluate where I am. You can see that I'm approaching the left-hand edge of the leaf that I'm wanting to decrease. And I know I want to decrease it because it's a complete leaf. I have all of these eyelets already done. I'm ready to start decreasing this. And if you placed a marker, you know that because your marker is right here. So once you reach this point, you're going to yarn over and pull through 3 loops. That's 1, 2, 3. Instead of the normal 2. Now you just decreased 1 stitch. And you can kind of see that it tends to lean toward the right, which is going to enhance the look of the leaf. It's going to make it kind of it's just going to make it nice and flowing up to its point. Then the next row is another one of those where you just work them as they present. You don't need to do any increases or decreases. And so that's pretty easy. But when we do these right-leaning decreases, the following row is a little bit different. It feels a little bit different than normal. And I think this is an area where you can end up basically undoing your decrease. So we're going to work across toward the decrease we worked in the previous return row. And we're going to just take a look at what that looks like. All right, so here we are to our decrease. I still have 2 vertical, or sort of vertical, this is more of diagonal, bars here, but I'm going to work through both of them as if they were 1 stitch and pull one up. And that just kind of enhances the lean of that as well. And I know it seems subtle, like, well, why don't you just work a decrease like normal then? Like, trust me, it really does look different. I mean, you can see the difference between these 2 types of decrease. It's subtle, and if you're really having trouble with it and you're constantly having to go back because you've missed a decrease, by all means switch to the regular kind of decrease. Like, if it's a big deal, don't bother. I think it makes a difference, but it's a pretty subtle difference, to be honest with you. And for you, it may not be worth the extra effort, because then it is extra effort. You have to pay attention in the return pass, which you don't normally have to do. That's normally turn your brain off time, which might be nice to have in a pattern like this where you're actually having to count stitches and count rows. So I completely understand if that decrease doesn't seem worth it. So let's show that decrease one more time. We're also going to show some yarn overs in this following row. So we're ready for row 14, which has both a decrease and 2 yarn overs. All right, so again, you're always starting with 2 purls. I've probably said that several times now, but it's easy to forget and get off your stitch count. And we're going to go across, and again, once we get to the left-hand side of this leaf, we're just going to pick up a loop in each of these. We're not doing anything right now. 1 and 2, and these would be the 2 to mark if you so desire, if that's going to make it easier for you. And then 2 purls, yarn over, Tunisian simple stitch, yarn over, purl and purl. All right, so here we are on our return pass. So again, you do have to pay attention, particularly if you're making something wider than I'm currently making, where you're going to have to do it multiple times. Yeah, if you have quite a few repeats across, you're going to have to pay attention then the whole time. All right, so we're back to this edge, and you can see where we did a decrease before. You can see our purls. And if you put a marker there, you can see your marker. And you're going to pull through 3 loops. There's our decrease. You can really start to see then this leaf slanting over the side. All right, I'm going to turn off the video while I work through the rest of this swatch, and then I'll show you how to finish off. So I was working through this and actually made a mistake, and so I thought it would be helpful for you to see how to recover when you forget to do one of the decreases. So as you can see, I forgot to do my right leading decrease. So to work backwards, I mean, you can just unravel it, I guess, but some of these rows get pretty long. So rather than do that, I take the loop off the hook and I just gently work my hook back through these 3, and then I unravel it until I'm just before where I need to work the decrease, and then I just put it right back on the hook. Let's see, do I need to do one more? Yeah. And then yarn over and pull through 3. And now I've recovered very nicely. And you can do the same thing even if you've worked a whole bunch more stitches back. You just gently work back underneath all these loops until you get back to the point where you made your mistake. All right, so I'm ready to finish off. I like to end on row 20 so that my last row of single crochet is going to be worked into these yarn overs. And remember, so yeah, rows 2 through 21 are the repeat. So if you're making something large, you're just going to make more of what we just did here. But when you're ready to finish off, I like to chain 1 to get the height for the single crochet row. And then I'm going to work into this first stitch. This is the only time in Tunisian crochet you're actually going to do that. So I go back into this first stitch and single crochet. And then I'm just going to go ahead and single crochet in every stitch across. Sometimes you may find you need to use a different hook for this, or just tweak your tension a little bit to make it match everything else. And again, remember, when you come to one of these decreases, you work through both loops as if it was one stitch. I'm not treating the pearls any differently. I suppose it would be possible to do a pearl single crochet, but I honestly don't see any value in that, and it's harder to do, so I don't do it. And we're going to come up here on some yarn overs, which again we're going to work into like you would any space when single crocheting into a space. Here's our yarn over, single crochet, and our second yarn over. And this is all that there really is to it, I suppose. You can really make this just about any size. I highly recommend, before you get started on making something larger, I highly recommend working up a gauge swatch just like I've done here. Exactly this size. It's just the size. You can see it's the size of the chart. And I think that's a great way to get a feel for how big of an item you're going to end up with. If you're making a blanket or a wrap, working this gauge swatch first is going to be super helpful. The second advice is blocking. Block your gauge swatch first of all, and then when you're done, you're definitely going to want to block your finished product. I want to show you the difference between this piece we just made and this piece that I made and then blocked. And you can see that there's a significant difference in size. There's a significant difference in stitch definition. It just looks a lot neater. It's blocking is an essential part of finishing your project. Don't skimp on it. I hope this has been helpful. Definitely let me know down below if you have any comments or questions or suggestions. Be sure to subscribe to my channel so you can get my featured stitch patterns every month. Thanks and have a great day.